Hello crows and non-crows alike, my name is Joe Mack, otherwise known as Support Crow, and today I want to talk about my one and only problem going into Dragonage the Veilguard. Now, I know a lot of negativity has circled around this game for quite a bit now, and I know that many fans of the game and just gamers in general are just sort of sick of it. Like, it's annoying, definitely. And the last thing I want to do is add onto that negativity. So believe me when I say that this is not a video intended for that purpose. I'm not here to add on to the fire of things, right? But I'm also a fan, and I do have my own legitimate concerns. And I've been rather hyped for this game, and I've shared that hype, and I feel a sense of responsibility to be transparent in my concern as well. Now, that being said, I think I do have a concern that I think many fans also kind of share. So, yeah, let's talk about it for a little bit. Now, if you're new to the franchise, then I recommend going away for a little bit, because major spoilers are in your horizon right now, because we're going to be talking about my concern over the lack of choices and consequences in Inquisition that are not being carried over into Veilguard. So if you don't want to be incredibly spoiled for for Inquisition or Veilguard, I recommend vacating the premises. You know, just like turn YouTube off and run away. So yeah, as confirmed by bioware, there are only 3 choices that you get to choose at the beginning of the game, and then those choices sort of impact and, you know, do whatever they do into the world of Veilguard. And while I appreciate the effort, that is rather lacking, to say the least. You know, and the 3 choices being, you know, whether or not our Inquisitor romanced anybody, their companions, whether or not we disbanded the Inquisition, and whether or not we vowed to redeem Solus, which at a glance makes sense because they can be rather pivotal. All that is enough to generate a foundation to work with in the new game. I don't believe it adequately reflects our time with Inquisition. Now, I know that it's been 10 years since the last game, and you know, we got new players coming in that are interested in the franchise and what's it all about and all that fun jazz. But and that has been basically the answer for whenever this question comes up about the choices being taken up and put into the new game. But my question to that answer is, who is this game for? Like, is Veilguard just for new players? I mean, what about the people that waited for this game for a decade? And what about the choices themselves? I mean, two of those choices, 2 out of 3, are from a DLC. Now, granted, they are very important questions. You know, it is important to know whether or not the Inquisition was disbanded, and I would say that it is arguably important to know whether or not the Inquisitor wants to redeem or kill Solus, even though they're not the main character of the next game, and that decision shouldn't really reflect the decision that the new character makes. But anyway, but what really peeves me is that the first question, the one thing that matters throughout all of the base game of Inquisition and 2 other DLCs, the only choice that supposedly matters is who we decided to Like, really? That's it? Out of all the choices, who we decided to take the bed is the one that matters the most. And in my opinion, no, it's not. like I get that it's important for that to carry over for, you know, the fans, but it's ultimately irrelevant compared to some of the greater world-changing events that took place during Inquisition. So first and foremost, one major decision that I believe we should have chose was who the next divine is. Now, granted, the divine is the leader of the Chantry, who is based in Orlais, which is in southern Thedas. However, I want to point out that this ruler is pivotal towards the Andrastian religion that is spread across the world, and they are situated in a stately power, Orlais, that makes choices that are felt all across the world. There's also the Mage Templar situation, because at the start of the game we are left with this Mage Templar war, and we have to kind of settle that. We have to resolve that in the first act, and we choose one. We either support the mages or we support the Templars. Whoever we don't support becomes a major antagonistic group that sort of terrorizes us throughout the remainder of the game. But regardless of that choice, though, I think at some point, I think it would be reasonable to say that whoever the divine is will sort of railroad that decision, sort of align the choices that we made in Inquisition with kind of their choices of their own. So, for example, if Liliana becomes... I'm about to say the Pope. If Liliana becomes, fantasy Pope, then one, there's going to be a lot of nugs. But also, the circles will probably be abolished. You'll have mages kind of running around doing their own thing, unless of course she's been hardened, she's been ruthless. In that case, she might have a lot more restraint in that regard. But I think at some point, over the course of the next 10 years, she could soften up a bit more. She could it could be said that she sees the light. Her religious naivete and the goodness of people sort of comes back to her, and she gives mages the space and the freedom to rule over themselves and to make decisions for themselves and kind of govern themselves and give them their freedom, essentially. In other words, under Liliana, I see the College of Enchanters being a thing. Whereas Divine Vivian would reestablish the circles and establish a stricter policy on keeping eyes on mages, and perhaps even heightening the qualifications to being a mage, maybe even putting even more tests around the harrowing, and maybe even doing multiple harrowings. I can see her refining what a good mage is, to a lot of mages' dismay. While her intentions might be good, in a manner of speaking, her methods would definitely make the whole circle situation a lot worse. And then the third divine, you got Cassandra, Divine Cassandra, who's a lot more actionable. She would probably reestablish the circles, but she would not make them as bad as Vivian. She would implement some type of code of ethics. She would hold Templars accountable for any kind of mistreatment. So while the circles would exist, and while mages may not have their full autonomy, I do believe the conditions they are in would be significantly better than how they were in, say, Origins, especially in Kirkwall. And under Divine Cassandra, we could say that she reestablishes the Seekers, even though that in itself is a choice that can get a little iffy. So for those of you who don't know, Cassandra goes looking for the Seekers because they've been missing this entire time. She goes to a ruin, well, not really a ruin, but you get the point. Anyway, she finds them, they're dead, except for one guy who has a demon growing within them. I'm looking forward to see what comes of that, if anything. Eventually she finds this book and it explains to her, you know, the method of tranquility, which is a way of pacifying mages by removing all of their magic, by removing all of their emotions. It cuts their spirit away from the Fade. It cuts away their connection. It basically turns them into like this emotionless husk. And for a very, 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 very long time, a lot of people thought this was permanent. This is not the case. This book reveals to Cassandra that the Seekers of Justice knew that tranquility can be reversed. So in a manner of speaking, the Seekers could have easily, well, maybe not easily, but they could have prevented or lessened the damage that the Mage Templar War caused. And in that moment, we help her make this very pivotal choice. And I want to stress the help her bit here, because while this is technically a choice that we make, it is ultimately her decision. A decision that at any point in her life, including when she's divine, can go back on. So that's the point I want to make. So her decision is that, hey, she can try to rebuild the Seekers into something a lot better than what they were, or to just sort of let them die and let them fade off into the past. I believe that as divine, we could say that the Seekers of Truth come back. Now, while they may not be like a strong force that's helping up the Veilguard, it would be nice to see them in a mission. Preferably the one that would say, oh, hey, by the way, this is the divine, and this divine wants your help with something, and in exchange, you get gold or something. Something, while it might seem mindlessly simple to do that, and perhaps just like a throwaway consequence, it still acknowledges your choice from Inquisition. So while it might not be like this grand thing, it is still respectful of the fans that have come this far. But speaking of people in powerful positions, let's talk about the fate of Orlais. Let's talk about who we choose to rule over it. Because in Inquisition, we get the opportunity to really decide who becomes the ruler of an entire nation. It's one of my favorite parts in the game, actually. We go to a ball, there's a whole outsmarting the opponent thing going on. We get to dance. That was really cool. Fun times all around. But anyway, the three choices there is either, Empress Celine remains in her throne, or she gets killed and Emperor Gaspard assumes the throne, or Celine gets killed and Briala, this elven rebel, if you want to say, uses Gaspard as like a puppet, but ultimately she is the one ruling over the nation. And again, while the divine might be a leader of this religion that stretches across the world, think of the impact an emperor or empress has over a nation that trades with pretty much everyone. We hear the line in Inquisition, what happens in Orlais is felt all throughout the world. So what happens in Veilguard? Like, who sits on the throne? Who is making the decisions? Because Celine, she kind of wants things to remain in the status quo. Gaspard wants a more militaristic, more actionable kind of empire. As for Briala, she wants power. She wants freedom for her people. She wants, the treatment of elven kind to be a lot better in Orlais and potentially across the world. And given that the Tevinter Imperium still deals with elven enslavement, I have a feeling that a Briala-led Orlais would have a rather strenuous relationship with Tevinter, and perhaps even be assisting the one of the factions, the Shadow Dragons, in their pursuit to end slavery and bring justice to corrupt officials. I don't see Briala just sort of like sitting back and just ignoring what happens there. The next choice is who we decide to leave in the Fade. You know, when we are fighting like this demon army out in the hissing wastes near Adamant Fortress or in Adamant Fortress, we end up in the Fade and we bring a couple people along. Those people are Stroud, Alistair, Hawk, or Logain. I almost forgot about him. I can never forget about Logain. And at some point, we have to make the decision between Hawk and one of the Wardens, and who we decide to take with us, comes with us, and who we decide to leave behind. Presumably gets killed by the big demon monster thing. That seems like an open and closed kind of choice. That being said, this is a bit of a speculation kind of theory bit, but one major consequence of that is, hey, maybe Hawk or one of the Wardens didn't straight up die. Maybe they somehow survived, and they've been living out in the Fade for like 9 to 10 years. Like, can you imagine how wretched we would feel? like leaving someone to die is bad enough, but abandoning someone for a decade in the Fade, of no less, in this basically like torturous hellscape. Like, God only knows what they'd be feeding on, like what kind of state their mind would be in. And then at some point in Veilguard, when we are dealing with some Fade stuff, they can pop back up and maybe we save them. Maybe they die. Maybe this is during the bit where the Inquisitor comes in, and the Inquisitor's just like, "Oh my God, by the Maker, I should have saved you. I'm so sorry." Or maybe we just kill them. I don't know. Your Inquisitor is your Inquisitor. You do you. But another major decision is what we decide to do with the Grey Wardens over in Adamant Fortress. Because once we're done with that trauma session, we decide whether or not to either keep the Grey Wardens under our wing and make them part of the Inquisition, or we send those Grey Wardens packing and exile them back to Wayside Fortress. And if who we decide to bring back with us comes along for the ride, more or less. Kinda. Eventually they go back to Wayside Fortress, which is a location that we're going to in Veilguard. So the fact that we have not made that decision in Veilguard means that something has happened, because Hawk, like the main character of the second game, he does, depending on our choices, he does go to Wayside Fortress. So what happens? What happens to him? Like, I guess it's been a decade. He can leave, sure, but he still goes there. He still goes to make like an impact. I think the survivor of Adamant Fortress should definitely be in Wayside Fortress, you know, and we get to like interact with them and see kind of what they've been up to this entire time and what progress they've made and whatever they're trying to do. And last, but certainly not least, Morrigan. Morrigan, the Witch of the Wilds, makes a reappearance in Dragonage the Veilguard, and it confuses me as to why we were not given certain choices about her, because are we just going to like skim over the fact that she's had dealings with the Inquisitor? Like, are we just going to skim over whether or not she drank from the Well of Sorrows? Which, you know, granted, Mythal isn't really in the picture, but still that knowledge, that information, that power is still there, right? Or maybe it all just sort of faded away and died with Mythal. You know, it's hard to say. It's not really hard to say. We just don't know. we do not know. Yeah, so hopefully we'll be given some sort of answer on that, regardless. But there is one little major thing, one little major detail, one slight little choice that we made back in Dragon Age Origins that had some pretty, I would say, pretty major ramifications in Morrigan's life. She had a kid. She's potentially a mother, and we actually see this child in Inquisition, depending on whether or not the warden in Origins did the do, and Morrigan had a kid, by the way, that once held the soul of an old god. How is Morrigan? Is Morrigan just not gonna mention the fact that she has a son? I mean, like, she is pretty reserved, but still, I mean, those are the choices that I believe should have definitely made their way somehow into the game. And I know gamers do not want to sit down and do a questionnaire about who or what they decided to help, not help, or choose or not choose in the game. And, you know, it doesn't have to be a questionnaire at the start of the game. It can be periodically asked and determined throughout the game, and certain things can change depending on that. And I believe there are definitely ways that this could have been done, but blatantly ignoring all the choices, all the world-changing choices that we could have, that we did make in Inquisition, and just boiling it all down to who we decided to it's a little insulting, to be honest. And yeah, that's my one concern for Veilguard, because I'm concerned that it is made for new gamers and not necessarily for the fans that have been with BioWare the entire time. So, and that might seem kind of selfish. It probably is kind of selfish, but wouldn't it be better to have a more complete, fleshed out experience rather than something, you know, if you're gonna start from scratch, I would have much rather them just not do Dragon Age at all, honestly. That's just me though. Hey, you know, if confusing new players, and if bringing in new players is really such a concern, then maybe Dragon Age needs to end. You know, maybe Dragon Age 5 needs to be the last one. You know, and then we can start off with something new, something fresh, or maybe we can bring back the Anthem IP and actually make it into a proper BioWare game this time around. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it. Let me know what y'all think. maybe I'm just thinking too much about it. Maybe I'm thinking too little about it. Let me know down in the comments. I look forward to seeing it. But yeah, Dragon Age comes out this Thursday. I am looking forward to it, regardless of my concern. And yeah, until then, be safe, be well, be kind. Bye-bye.